Okay, Anthony, here is where I think we're going to be, or we have left off in class. So we're going to read aloud pages 16 through 14. So just do your best to listen. Okay. So let's quickly summarize what just happened. So our author is talking about this idea that people in the past wanted to make sure that children did not get too much school. Okay, so that's he's kind of talking about the research about what too much school could be. And then let's just review our vocabulary word. He says rest also presented particular opportunities for strengthening cognitive and analytical skills. And remember, cognitive has something to do with thinking, right? It's how your mind processes. So, related to knowledge or understanding.
Cognitive.
Okay, so we'll get started on page 6. This idea that effort must be balanced by rest could not be more different from Asian notions about study and work, of course. But then again, the Asian worldview was shaped by the rice paddy. In the Pearl River Delta, the rice farmer planted 2 and sometimes 3 crops a year. The land was fallow only briefly. In fact, one of the singular features of rice cultivation is that because of the nutrients carried by the water used in irrigation, the more a plot of land is cultivated, the more fertile it gets. But in Western agriculture, the opposite is true. Unless a wheat or cornfield is left fallow every few years, the soil becomes exhausted. Every winter, fields are empty. The hard labor of spring planting and fall harvesting is followed, like clockwork, by the slower pace of summer and winter. This is the logic the reformers applied to the cultivation of young minds. We formulate new ideas by analogy, working from what we know toward what we don't know. And what the reformers knew were that the rhythms of the agricultural seasons. A mind must be cultivated, but not too much, lest it be exhausted. And that was the remedy, and what was the remedy for the dangers of exhaustion? The long summer vacation, a peculiar and distinctive American legacy that has had profound consequences for the learning patterns of the students of the present day. Summer vacation is a topic seldom mentioned in American educational debates. It is considered permanent and an inviolate feature of school life, like high school football or senior prom. I'm going to pause and click and hear our word. Okay, so this is another vocabulary word that we have. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this site.
Inviolate.
Inviolate. Okay, it means secure against change. So they're saying that summer vacation is something that people don't debate. It's just like, okay, this is how we do things. And now he's going to talk a little bit about what that means. So he says, but take a look at the following sets of elementary school test score results and see if your faith in the value of long summer holidays isn't profoundly shaken. These numbers come from research led by the Johns Hopkins University sociologist Carl Alexander. Alexander tracked the progress of 650 first graders from the Baltimore public school system, looking at how they scored on a widely used math and reading skills exam called the California Achievement Test. These are reading scores for the first 5 years of elementary school, broken down by socioeconomic class, low, middle, and high. Look at the first column. The students start in first grade with meaningful but not overwhelming differences in their knowledge and ability. The first graders from the wealthiest homes have a 32-point advantage over the first graders from the poorest homes. And by the way, first graders from poor homes in Baltimore are really poor. Now look at the fifth grade column. By that point, 4 years later, the initially modest gap between rich and poor has more than doubled. This achievement gap is a phenomenon that has been observed over and over again, and it typically provokes one of two responses. The first response is that disadvantaged kids simply don't have the same inherent ability to learn as children from more privileged backgrounds. They are not as smart. The second, slightly more optimistic conclusion is that in some way our schools are failing poor children. We simply aren't doing a good enough job of teaching them the skills they need. But here's where Alexander's study gets interesting, because it turns out that neither of those explanations ring true. The city of Baltimore didn't give its kids the California Achievement Test just at the end of every school year, in June. It gave them the test in September too, just after summer vacation ended. What Alexander realized is that the second set of test results allowed him to do a slightly different analysis. If he looked at the difference between the score a student got at the beginning of the school year in September and the score he or she got the following June, he could measure precisely how much the student learned over the school year. And if he looked at the difference between a student's score in June and then the following September, he could see how much that student learned over the course of the summer. In other words, he could figure out, at least in part, how much of the achievement gap is the result of things that happened during the school year and how much it has to do with what happens during summer vacation. Let's start with the school year gains. This table shows how many points the students' test scores rose from the time they started classes in September to the total time they stopped in June. The total column represents their cumulative classroom learning from all 5 years of elementary school. Here is a completely different story from the one suggested by the first table. The first set of test results made it look like lower income kids were somehow failing in the classroom, but here we see plainly that isn't true. Look at the total column. Over the course of 5 years of elementary school, poor kids outlearn the wealthiest kids. 189 points to 184 points. They lag behind middle class kids only by a modest amount. And in fact, in 1 year, second grade, they learn more than middle or upper class kids. Next, let's see what happens if we just look at how reading scores change during summer vacation. Do you see the difference? Look at the first column, which measures what happens over the summer after first grade. The wealthiest kids come back in September and their reading scores have jumped more than 15 points. The poorest kids come back from the holidays and their reading scores have dropped almost 4 points. Poor kids may outlearn rich kids during the school year, but during the summer they fall far behind. Now take a look at the last column, which totals up the summer gains from first grade to fifth grade. The reading scores of the poor kids go up by 0.26 points. When it comes to reading skills, poor kids learn nothing when school is not in session. The reading scores of the rich kids, by contrast, go up a whopping 52.49 points. Virtually all the advantage that wealthy students have over poor students is the result of differences in the way privileged kids learn when they are not in school. So, what Alexander's work suggests is that the way in which education has been discussed in the United States is backwards. An enormous amount of time is spent talking about reducing class size, rewriting curricula, buying every student a new shiny laptop, and increasing school funding, all of which assumes there is something fundamentally wrong with the jobs schools are doing. But look back at the second table, which shows between what happens between September and June. Schools work. The only problem with school for the kids who aren't achieving is that there isn't enough of it. Alexander, in fact, has done a very simple calculation to demonstrate what would happen if the children in Baltimore went to school year-round. The answer is that poor kids and wealthy kids would, by the end of elementary school, be doing math and reading at almost the same level. Suddenly, the causes of Asian math superiority become more obvious. Students in Asian schools don't have long summer vacations. Why would they? Cultures that believe that the route to success lies in rising before dawn 360 days a year are scarcely going to give their children 3 straight months off of summer. The school year in the United States is on average 180 days long. The South Korean school year is 220 days long. The Japanese school year is 243 days long. Okay, I'm going to skip this paragraph, okay? And we are going to talk a little bit about KIPP again. Okay, right here. They start school at 7:25, says David Levin of the students at the Bronx KIPP Academy. They do a course called Thinking Skills until 7:55. They do 90 minutes of English, 90 minutes of math every day, except in 5th grade, where they do 2 hours of math a day. An hour of science, an hour of social science, an hour of music at least twice a week, and then you have an hour and 15 minutes of orchestra on top of that. Everyone does orchestra. Their day goes from 7:25 until 5 p.m. After 5, there are homework clubs, detention, sports teams. The kids are here from 7:25 until 7 p.m. If you take an average day and you take out lunch and recess, our kids are spending 50 to 60% more time learning than the traditional public student. I'm going to skip a little bit. He says, the beginning is hard, he went on, but the end of the day, they're restless. Part of it is endurance, part of it is motivation. Part of it is incentives and rewards and fun stuff. Part of it is good old-fashioned discipline. You throw all that into the stew. We talk a lot here about grit and self-control. The kids know what those words mean. Okay. Let's read this paragraph right here so we can hear our vocabulary word. What that extra time does is allow for a more relaxed atmosphere. Corcoran said after the class was over, I find that the problem with math education is the sink or swim approach. Everything is rapid fire, and the kids who get it first are the ones who are rewarded. So there comes to be a feeling that there are people who can do math and there are people who aren't math people. I think that the extended amount of time gives you the chance as a teacher to explain things and more time for kids to sit and digest everything that's going on, to review, to do things at a much slower pace. It seems counterintuitive, but we do things at a slower pace, and as a result, we get a lot more.
Counterintuitive.
So counterintuitive means contrary to what somebody expects. Okay, so we are going to jump down and talk about Marita, who this is about. Okay, so let's talk about her. She is a kid who goes to KIPP. The student's name is Marita. She's an only child who lives in a single-parent home. Her mother never went to college. The two of them share a one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. Marita used to go to a parochial school down the street from her home until her mother heard of KIPP. When I was in 4th grade, me and one of my other friends, Tanya, we both applied to KIPP. I remember Miss Owens. She interviewed me, and the way she was saying it made it sound so hard that I thought I was going to prison. I almost started crying. And then she was like, if you don't want to sign this, you don't have to sign this. But then my mom was right there, so I signed it. With that,